Her 3 young sons. They're little guys, they're 7, 5, and 2. She was 6 months pregnant with her 4th child, and she dug all those graves. And we're talking temperatures, upper 80s, hot and humid, typical for the summers here. Nothing but a pickaxe and a shovel. You talk about one tough and determined woman. Must be that girl power they talk about. Off to the right, statue of a woman as well. Jenny Wade is portrayed there, and sadly, she's the civilian that was killed during the battle in that house. She was at her sister's home, who just had a little baby boy. She was helping take care of her. She was in the kitchen doing some baking, and a stray bullet fired from somewhere downtown here in front of us went through 2 doors, hit her in the back, and killed her instantly. I mean, it was just a freak accident where she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But amazingly, the only civilian death, which, when you think of all that was going on, that's rather remarkable. Big tree here to the right, that sycamore tree is well over 250 years of age, as is the other one coming up here on the right. They would have been here at the time of the battle. Yeah, we call them witness trees. It's kind of a neat name for them. If they could only speak, think of the stories they could tell. The building up here on the left on the corner, the Farnsworth House, you can see all kinds of bullet markings on the wall there. A lot of shadows from the tree, but that's actually battle damage. These are original structures, most of these are. They've got little bronze plaques or bronze plates out front that'll say they're Civil War buildings. The Shriver House to your left, where you see the bunting and the red flag. Red flag means it was a hospital site. They opened that up to the public about 10 years ago, and when they cleaned it up, inside they found bullets under the floorboards. They found medical instruments in there. We know these were used by the soldiers, and mostly the Southern soldiers because they captured the town. There's a building here to your left, Museum of History. You see all that bunting. How many of you watched that show, American Pickers? Yeah, they did a filming segment there about a year ago. Maybe you saw it on TV. Eric Dorr is the owner of that place, and he brought those guys in. He gave them about $20,000 to go out, locate like a carbine, some Civil War things. And it went over so well that now they use him as sort of a source whenever they're doing research or they're trying to pick up some Civil War artifacts. So we're going to head right down to the center of town here. Locals call this the square, even though it's obviously more of a circle or a rotary or a roundabout, but 1863 it was known as the Diamond. It was all open dirt road. There wasn't any circle then. That came actually many years after the war. So we're going to go straight. So we go halfway around this. Now this is downtown Gettysburg right here. A lot of traffic comes in from left and right. There isn't any bypass. You'll see all these semis and tractor trailers and buses coming in. The red brick building to the right, the big one on the corner there, 3-story. That's where President Lincoln stayed when he came in November. There's a statue of him down below there. He's got his hat off. He's talking to somebody. Statue of Abe. He stayed up on the 2nd floor. David Wills was the young attorney that lived there at the time and had invited President Lincoln, well, among others, to come here, for the actual dedication of the cemetery. And the train station, that'll be on the right as well, just beyond the theater here. It's been nicely restored. That's from 1857. That's the one President Lincoln arrived at when he came. That's to the right. Now the Lincoln Diner to your left, that's more 1950s vintage, not 1850s, but a nice little family restaurant. And this Gettysburg Transit Center, that just opened up this past summer. I haven't even been in there yet, but we've got these blue trolleys and others that kind of work their way through town, and they're hoping it's going to help alleviate some of the heavy congestion that we may be contending with, especially next year, because next year is our 150th anniversary, so that's the big observance of the battle, and we anticipate very high numbers as far as attendance. The banner year for Gettysburg was 1963. It was the centennial 100th anniversary. There were more than 2 million visitors that year. So now this next year, of course, the papers, they could be maybe exaggerating a bit, but they've been claiming that we're going to get well over 3 million visitors. I don't know if that's going to happen. I personally hope it won't, because I don't think the infrastructure can handle it, but we'll see. Here's some of the campus of the Gettysburg College to your left. It was founded in 1832. So at the time of the battle in 63, it's only been here 31 years. It was 50 students at the time of the battle, 3 buildings. Currently it's about 2,700 students. It's a small liberal arts college. Straight ahead. Professor Jacobs from the college actually recorded the temperatures during the battle. So it's because of him we know it was, in the upper 80s, and typical for the summers here, hot and humid. And those soldiers are wearing those all woolen uniforms, and they're carrying 30, 40 pounds of extra weight on their bodies with their rifle, their haversack, their cartridge belt, their canteen, all those things. They're marching 8, 10, 12 miles a day, sometimes even greater distances. See, now already we're approaching the outskirts of town. From the center of town, probably going in any one direction, 3-4 blocks. I'd say that's kind of the older district. The further out you get, the more modern day homes you see. And already now we're seeing open fields. The college controls these fields to your left, these athletic fields. And we're going to take a left here. So, they've modified some of that for drainage purposes, but basically what you see is pretty much what it was like at the time of the battle. Notice the difference here. Open fields, no protective cover to speak of, not much in the way of tree lines even. These monuments are out in the open, which means these soldiers didn't have any kind of protective cover at all. And they're going to suffer the losses that reflect that. Keep in mind, these regiments represent several hundred men that come from all the various states. Michigan had 7 infantry regiments that were here. And then they had 4 cavalry units. Custer was here with the 7th Cavalry. And then, of course, you had 1 artillery unit as well. So, they're well represented. And Oakland County specifically had a couple of regiments. The 1st, Michigan, and the 5th that were specific to your county that would have fought primarily in the known as the Bloody Wheat Field. Well, actually, the 7th had some guys, too, and they would have been involved in fighting as it related to Pickett's charge. So I can talk about them a little bit later as well. To set the stage for what's going to happen here, in the summer of 1863, and I suppose to roll back the clock a little bit further, we know the American Civil War begins in the spring of 1861. It didn't really finish until the summer of 65. So, it's 4 very long and tragic years in American history. And, well, sadly, and ultimately, it'll end up being the worst. So hang it right here. It's hard to conceive of these numbers. When you think of a war and its duration and the large numbers of lives that were lost, this country at the time of the war was less than 40 million people. We were a fairly small nation then. Now we are well over 300 million. And yet when the war has concluded, the loss of life from battle wounds and disease was well over 620,000. As a matter of fact, there was even a program that came out on PBS about a month ago entitled Death and Suffering. It was a new release that dealt with the loss of life during the war, and a professor from Binghamton, New York, actually is the one that did a study where he believed the losses were even greater because he included men that might have lived for a year or 2 or 3, but then they died eventually of their wounds. And consequently, he believes the loss of life from the war was well over 750,000 men. It's an incredible loss of life. World War II, for instance, as bad as that was, we lost over 400,000. Even that number is significantly less than this war. But again, it's civil war. You've got Americans fighting Americans. The losses are coming from both sides. And those are the guys that died. That doesn't even take into account the ones that were, severely wounded. They did manage to get back to their homes and families. They tried getting on with their lives again as farmers and maybe factory workers, merchants. You didn't have, health insurance plans then. You didn't have the security of unions. It was not going to be an easy task for some of these men to get back into civilian life based on what they've been through. See, there's one of your buses. I figured one of them would still probably be up here. We'll make a quick stop here, too, so I can point out some things. Get you guys off the bus as much as we can. We'll take advantage of the weather. It's great, so might as well do a little bit of that. But big difference now in the landscape. Here's a classic example of where the tree removal has made a big difference. We're going to hang a right here and park up there where the buses are, but you can see a lot of trees that are right in front of us now. And as we turn, they're going to be off to your left. Well, again, just about 3-4 years ago, that tree line extended, off to the right. So the monument that we're approaching is the Peace Light, and there was a tree line behind it that was just as thick as what you have to the left. It went all the way down to the right, where that little tower is that we just passed, and to where you see that clump of trees and a tall, skinny monument. So again, you could have been up at the top of the hill here. Even with the leaves off the trees, you couldn't see Gettysburg in the distance. Well, now we can. It's almost directly in front of us. And that's the point. They're trying to bring back more of the original look. And most people are on board with that. They think it's a good idea. We'll have to park in front of you. There's a couple of spots again.
Forest management, the eternal flame.
Well, there were a lot of environmentalists that got really upset. They didn't want to have all these healthy trees taken out. Their attitude was, this is a national park. What are you doing? Air quality being one of our central issues in this day and age. And I get that. I think most of us understand where they're coming from. But the thing to understand is this is a national military park. All right, this isn't like Yellowstone or Yosemite. We're here to understand the significance of the battle, sacrifice of the soldiers. The trees have gotten in the way and they're going to keep taking them out. However, if you tend to be a tree hugger and you hate to see that happen, I will say on a positive note, young trees over there to the right, they are putting in orchards. Yeah.
Where you're sitting.
I'll finish up.